15 Ancient Wisdom Stories, The Law of Cause and Effect and Virtue in Life. Have you ever wondered why some people always seem to have good luck and things go smoothly for them, while others seem to struggle with constant hardships? In the flow of life, there is a mysterious law that operates quietly, often unnoticed by many, yet always in motion, the law of cause and effect and virtue. It's not by chance that the ancients, for centuries, believed that every action leaves a trace, and every good intention is recorded. Today, let's embark on a journey to explore stories about cause and effect and virtue, stories that will change the way you perceive life and the decisions you make every day. Do we truly have control over our destiny, or are we gradually creating our lives based on what we sow? Let's dive in to uncover the answer. The first story, turning weakness into strength, disadvantage into advantage. Once upon a time, there was a young boy who lost his left arm in a traffic accident, yet he remained determined to pursue his dream of learning judo. Fortunately, he met an experienced judo master who agreed to take him as an apprentice. Strangely, during the training, the master only taught him a single technique. Despite practicing tirelessly and improving his skills, the boy was puzzled as to why he wasn't taught other techniques. After 3 months of training, the boy gathered the courage to ask his master, "Master, why haven't you taught me other techniques? I'm afraid that with only one technique, it will be hard for me to win in competitions." The master smiled calmly and replied, "This is the only technique you need to know. Practice it until it becomes perfect." Although the boy didn't fully understand his master's words, he continued to train diligently with full trust and patience. Each day, he worked hard to master the technique. A few months later, his master took him to a local judo tournament. At the tournament, everyone was amazed to see the one-armed boy winning match after match. In the first 2 rounds, he won easily. In the semifinals, his opponent was stronger and more skilled, but the boy persisted, exploiting even the smallest openings in his opponent's defense. The opponent became impatient and made a mistake, which allowed the boy to win and advance to the final. The final match was a real challenge. His opponent was much bigger, stronger, and more experienced. From the start, the opponent launched a series of powerful attacks. The officials, concerned for the boy's safety, were ready to stop the match. However, the boy's master insisted that the match continue. When the match resumed, the opponent made a critical mistake by leaving his defense exposed. The boy seized the opportunity and executed the only technique he had trained with, swiftly defeating his opponent and winning the match. After the match, the boy was still shocked and confused by the outcome. Unable to contain his curiosity, he asked his master, "Master, how was I able to win with just one technique?" The master smiled and answered, "You won for 2 reasons. First, you have perfected one of the most difficult techniques in judo. Second, the only way your opponent could counter this technique was by grabbing your left arm. But you no longer have a left arm." The boy suddenly realized that his greatest weakness, losing his left arm, had turned into his greatest strength. Without his left arm, the technique he had mastered became nearly impossible for anyone to break. What seemed like a physical disadvantage became a unique advantage that no one else could have. This story reminds us that weaknesses and disadvantages don't have to hold us back, they can become a source of strength. Never be discouraged by your circumstances, find ways to turn them into an advantage. In every disadvantage, there is an opportunity. If we are persistent, train hard, and have the right guidance, what once seemed like a weakness can turn into a strength, helping us achieve success. When faced with difficulties, instead of blaming the circumstances or finding excuses, focus on your abilities and make the effort to overcome them. Remember, everyone has their own path, and what we choose to do shapes that path. With perseverance and patience, we will achieve mastery and succeed in ways that surprise even ourselves. The 12th story, The Wise Man's Surprise, the Awakening of the World. Once, Confucius and his disciples were passing through the state of Wei. On a dusty road, they encountered a farmer working diligently in his field. Confucius instructed his disciple, Yin Hui, to approach and ask for directions. Yin Hui approached the farmer and asked, "Excuse me, sir, could you kindly tell us the way?" The farmer looked at Confucius from a distance and then turned to ask, "Who is the one sitting over there?" Yin Hui proudly replied, "That is my master, Confucius, the sage who teaches the principles of morality and virtue." Hearing this, the farmer laughed aloud and said, "A sage? A teacher of morality? Has anyone ever had their house robbed just after stepping outside and then met someone calling himself a teacher of virtue? People might call him a teacher, but does he realize that life itself is nothing but a great robbery?" Yin Hui was momentarily stunned, but calmly responded, "My master teaches us the way of virtue, and it has nothing to do with theft." The farmer laughed again, "And it has nothing to do with theft?" In this world, when people's hearts are focused solely on personal gain, what is it but a large-scale robbery, stealing away the most truthful part of a person's heart? The way of the robber and the way of virtue walk hand in hand, like two sides of the same coin. Perhaps you and your master are also walking down that lonely path, the path called the solitary way, where one must go alone and learn alone. Asking for directions won't help. Yin Hui returned and reported the farmer's words. Confucius thought for a moment and then sighed deeply, saying, "That man is truly a wise hermit. Though he is a farmer, he understands the laws of heaven." His words have helped me realize that even when one pursues self-cultivation, no matter how lofty the goal, one can easily fall prey to greed and falsehood. On another occasion, when Confucius and his disciples passed through a village, they heard loud cries of grief from an elderly woman. She was holding her son, a young man dressed in fine clothes, who had just passed the imperial examination and was to be appointed as a high-ranking official. Confucius approached her with compassion and asked, "Your son has passed the highest exam and will soon be appointed as an official. Why, then, are you crying instead of rejoicing?" The elderly woman wiped away her tears and replied sorrowfully, "I cried because I know my son is walking down the wrong path. As a mother, I know that he has learned falsehoods just to climb the ladder of success. I am helpless. Education today does not teach people how to be virtuous. It fills their minds with empty, false knowledge so they can scramble for fame and fortune. The lessons in the books are not meant to help people become good, but to serve the powerful. My son's success as a scholar is not a joy, but a deep sorrow." Confucius, moved by her words, asked, "Would you want your son to follow me and learn the way of virtue? But if he follows me, he will have to abandon his ambition to be an official and forsake fame and wealth." The elderly woman quietly looked at Confucius, then nodded and took her son by the hand to bow and say farewell. Confucius, touched by the woman's sincerity, turned to his disciples and said, "Today, I fully understand the words of the farmer. Life is indeed a great robbery. People have stolen each other's souls." The young man, who later became known as Xingzi, went on to become one of Confucius' most distinguished disciples. Throughout his life, Xingzi continued his master's work, teaching others the path of virtue, writing books, and advising people to live by the principles of righteousness and maintain their moral integrity. His reputation spread, and his teachings remain a testament to the power of awakening in those who are brave enough to forsake fame and wealth to live honestly. The story of Confucius and the elderly mother serves as a reminder that life can blind us, causing us to forget the true purpose of living. But love, morality, and honesty are the essence of life. By living according to the principles of righteousness, cultivating ourselves, and appreciating moments of awakening, we can protect our souls amid the changing tides of life. The third story, holding the herb to find agarwood. Long ago, in a remote mountainous region, now part of Fujian province, there lived a couple with their young son. They were not wealthy, but thanks to the inheritance from their parents, they lived comfortably. Every day, they worked hard in farming and hunting, and although life was tough, they had a warm and happy home. One day, a friend of the husband, Ken, came to visit. Ken boasted that he had left worldly life to pursue spiritual cultivation, determined to become an immortal, and had gone up the mountain to search for agarwood, a rare and valuable wood that could carry prayers to the deities. He revealed to the host a special secret, a type of herb he had cultivated for many years. By simply holding it in your mouth, a person could travel through the forest for months without needing food and could not be harmed by wild animals. Upon hearing about the miraculous properties of the herb and the promise of wealth when finding agarwood, the husband's greed awakened. Ken, not entirely selfless, admired the beautiful jade chess piece the host had taken out to play with. The flawless, shiny jade chess piece made Ken even more covetous. Throughout the meeting, both secretly plotted. The husband wanted to steal the herb to go search for agarwood himself, while Ken wanted to take the jade chess piece. In the end, during their farewell, each silently swapped items. Ken secretly hid the chess piece in his sleeve, and the host secretly placed the herb in his bag, and they both immediately set off, determined to find the precious agarwood. However, the vast forests offered no sign of agarwood. The husband walked endlessly through dense forests and over steep mountains, but found nothing. As time passed, his initial excitement turned to frustration. He wanted to return, but he had forgotten the way. As time wore on, the herb supply dwindled. When the herb ran out, he transformed into a tiger, wandering the mountains, never to return. At home, the wife and son waited patiently, hoping for the husband's return. Day by day, their tears became a river, and in the end, both mother and child, along with their livestock, turned into stone. Passers-by who saw the stones, shaped like a mother and child, along with their dog, chicken, and household items such as baskets, sieves, and brooms, whispered that this family had turned to stone due to the husband's greed and delusion. Back to Ken. After discovering he had been deceived, he decided to chase after the husband to reclaim the precious herb. Reaching a steep cliff, in his desperation, he looked down at the vast valley. He slipped and fell. The jade piece from his sleeve fell out, turning into a stone chess piece. His body transformed into an ancient tree, its roots tightly clutching the stone. To this day, people can still see an old tree embracing a stone in Tin Sun Mountain as a reminder of the price paid for the insatiable greed of mankind. The story of holding the herb to find agarwood serves as a profound warning about the insatiable greed of humans. When greed grows, it is easy to lose oneself and give up everything for fleeting things. In life, greed can cause people to lose their way, overlook what they already have, and blindly chase things that do not belong to them, only to end up with emptiness and misfortune. The fourth story, chanting Buddha's name, is not as important as cultivating the heart. Long ago, there was a young married couple. The husband was a studious man, diligently reading books and seeking knowledge every day. The wife, on the other hand, was a devout follower of the Buddha, believing in the sacredness and tranquility of chanting Buddha's name. Every day, she would set aside time to sit in her private room, sincerely chanting the phrase Namo Amitabha Buddha repeatedly. One day, seeing his wife continuously chanting, the husband came up with a prank to test her reaction. He stood in the next room and suddenly called out her name. Upon hearing her husband's voice, the wife stopped chanting, turned her head and asked, "What's wrong, dear?" The husband just smiled and said, "Nothing, go ahead and continue." The wife turned back and resumed chanting, but not long after, the husband called her name again. She couldn't hold back and turned to ask, "What now?" The husband smiled and said, "Nothing at all." By this time, the wife was becoming a bit frustrated but still tried to turn back and continue chanting. Soon after, the husband called her name again. This time, she turned around, unable to hide her irritation, and said loudly, "What is it? Why do you keep calling me? I'm trying to chant the Buddha's name, but you're distracting me." The husband walked over to her and gently said, "My dear, I have only called your name 3 times, and you're already feeling tired and irritated. Yet, you chant Namo Amitabha Buddha thousands of times every day. Don't you think that even the Buddha might find it bothersome? When you chant without truly focusing your heart, what meaning does it have, no matter how many times you repeat it?" He continued, "If we are truly devoted to the Buddha, perhaps the most important thing is not how many times we chant, but whether our hearts are truly at peace, free from worries, and whether we perform good deeds and think kindly of others. Chanting the Buddha's name is not just about repeating the phrase, it's about cultivating our hearts, living with compassion, and always aiming for goodness. Only then will your chanting truly have meaning, and only then will the Buddha recognize your sincerity." This simple story carries a profound message. Chanting the Buddha's name or praying, if done merely as a ritual, holds no true value. To achieve genuine sincerity, the most important thing is to cultivate the heart, purify the mind, let go of negative emotions, treat others kindly, and live virtuously. Only when the heart is pure will the sincerity truly reach the Buddha, and in that way, one can find true peace in life. The story 5, Spilled water is hard to collect. The ancient saying spilled water is hard to collect, a broken mirror is hard to restore reminds us that once words are spoken or actions are taken, the consequences are often irreversible. Chu Shen, whose courtesy name was Ziong, lived in the Huiku region of the ancient Wu kingdom. He had a deep passion for studying and reading books, even though he lacked wealth or status. Despite his poor circumstances, he worked as a woodcutter to support his family. Every day, while carrying a bundle of firewood, he would read books and often recite poetry on his way. His wife, seeing their difficult life, repeatedly tried to stop him, urging him to spend less time reading and more time working to earn money. One day, while both were carrying firewood back home, his wife could no longer hold back and shouted at him to stop. Chu Shen smiled and replied, "Wait until I am 50 years old. I will surely become wealthy and will repay you for all the hardships you've endured." However, his wife lost all faith in his promises. She resented him for being a dreamer and believed he could never change his poor fate. Eventually, she demanded a divorce and remarried a wealthy man from the village. After the divorce, Chu Shen continued his solitary life, still carrying his firewood and reading along the familiar road. One day, he accidentally encountered his ex-wife and her new husband. They were visiting a grave, dressed in fine clothes, showing off their wealth. Seeing this, Chu Shen quietly walked away without saying a word, leaving them to live their lives. Later on, Chu Shen continued his studies and eventually passed the exams, earning a government position as the governor of Huiku. When he returned to his hometown, he rode in a luxurious carriage through the village path. He noticed his ex-wife and her new husband, now poor and destitute. Remembering the kindness of the past, Chu Shen stopped his carriage, invited both of them to ride with him, and arranged for them to stay in a house with fields and livestock in the village. His ex-wife, who received kindness from the husband she had once abandoned, began to feel regret and shame for her past choice. The internal conflict in her heart grew, and eventually, she could not bear the guilt and chose to take her own life. Chu Shen, though heartbroken, accepted it and gave her new husband a sum of money for her funeral expenses. Later, when people in the village recalled the story, many expressed regret and mocked his ex-wife. When she was alive, she had even tried to rekindle the relationship with Chu Shen, but he cleverly rejected her. Chu Shen poured a bowl of water onto the ground and said, "Try to collect this water if you can." This statement made her understand that once a person's heart has changed, relationships, like spilled water, cannot be restored. Chu Shen's story teaches us that life is like spilled water, it's hard to collect. Once words are spoken or actions are taken that hurt others, it's not easy to undo them. Thoughtless words and irresponsible actions leave behind consequences that cannot be changed. We should always be cautious in our thoughts, uphold our moral values, and cherish relationships, because once trust and affection are lost, it is like spilled water, it's very difficult to collect again. The story 6, Natural Disasters and Man-Made Calamities, where do they come from? History records that one day, while Emperor Yao was on a tour of his lands, he encountered two people who had been arrested for committing theft. Concerned for his people, Emperor Yao asked what had caused the crime, and he learned that they had stolen due to starvation caused by a prolonged drought. Upon hearing this, Emperor Yao was deeply saddened and ordered their release, telling his soldiers, "You should arrest me instead of them, for I have failed in my duty as a ruler." Everyone was shocked by this act of the emperor. He confessed two major faults. First, that his own virtue was insufficient, which caused heaven to be angered and brought about the drought, and second, that he had failed to educate the people properly, leading them to commit crimes. Emperor Yao's self-examination and sincerity moved heaven, and immediately a great rainstorm arrived, cooling and refreshing the region. Because of his virtue and compassion, Emperor Yao was praised as a sage ruler. Later kings and officials followed his example, taking responsibility for any disasters or hardships that befell their people or regions. This was a distinctive mindset in traditional societies, where moral governance and compassion were prioritized. History also recounts the story of King Tang. Upon ascending the throne, his kingdom suffered from a 5-year drought. King Tang blamed himself and ordered sacrifices to heaven to ask for rain. He even listed 6 mistakes he might have made, but the drought continued. 2 more years passed, and the people were near starvation. In the next ritual, the court officials suggested offering a living sacrifice to bring rain, but King Tang insisted that he could not harm his people for the sake of their survival. He decided to offer himself, performing the sacrifice to plead with heaven to stop punishing his people for his shortcomings. Just as he was preparing the offering, heavy rains suddenly fell, saving his people from the drought. In Buddhism, there is the concept of communal karma, meaning the collective karma created by a community. If a region is filled with people living immorally, natural disasters and diseases may occur as a result of the law of cause and effect. Conversely, if the people amend their ways, do good deeds, and accumulate virtue, their collective karma will be alleviated, and calamities may be reduced or only afflict the wicked. Over thousands of years of history, when kings and citizens alike worked on self-cultivation, society flourished and peace reigned. On the other hand, when people indulged in their desires, lived recklessly, and were selfish, natural disasters and calamities increased. This serves as a sign for people to self-reflect, correct their wrongs, and return to goodness before it is too late. The story 7, the sage seeks the mind, not the Buddha. In the Buddhist scriptures, it is taught, to have a pure land, one must purify their mind. Once the mind is purified, that is the pure land. A sage seeks the mind, not the Buddha, whereas the ignorant only seek the Buddha but not the mind. There is a story of an elderly woman living alone in a small thatched hut. Her husband and son had passed away, leaving her with only a small garden. Having tasted the bitterness of life, she longed for peace of mind. One day, a kind fellow villager taught her the mantra of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, Om Mani Padme Hum, and advised her to chant it regularly to eliminate her karma. However, the old woman could not read and had difficulty remembering the words, so she mistakenly chanted it as, "At Mari Bat Nahong." For 30 years, she chanted this incorrect mantra daily, both while working and resting, never once neglecting it. To count the number of repetitions, she placed 2 bowls, one filled with beans and the other empty. Each time she finished a chant, she would move one bean from the full bowl to the empty one. When the empty bowl was full, she would switch them. Despite chanting the wrong words, her sincere devotion transformed the beans, keeping them fresh and firm. Strangely, each time she chanted, the beans would move from one bowl to the other without her touching them. One day, a high Tibetan monk passed by and noticed a glowing light around the hut. Thinking that a true enlightened practitioner was inside, he went to meet the woman. To his surprise, she was just a simple village woman. He asked her how many years she had been practicing, and she told him that she had only been chanting the mantra at Mari Bat Nahong. Upon hearing this, the monk felt regretful and corrected her, teaching her the proper mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. The old woman, horrified, thought that her 30 years of effort had been wasted and sadly switched to chanting the new mantra. But after that, her mind was no longer at peace, and her thoughts became disturbed. The beans no longer moved from one bowl to the other as before. The monk left, but, as he looked back at the hut, he saw the light of aura had disappeared, replaced by a feeling of sadness. Realizing something, he returned and told the woman, "You should continue chanting as you did before." She joyfully returned to her old mantra, and this time, her heart was even more peaceful. As she chanted, the beans once again jumped from one bowl to the other, and a bright aura filled the entire sky. This story shows that sincere devotion can transcend external rules. When the mind is pure and calm, sincerity can influence even inanimate objects. On the contrary, when the mind is troubled and unsettled, even if the mantra is correct, the power of the chant is still tainted. The writer Dalai Lama once said, "The worldly realm and the pure land are only separated by one door. Inside the door is purity, outside is the tumultuous waves." We all wish for peace of mind. Ordinary people seek tranquility, while true practitioners seek purity. However, sometimes, while chanting or praying to the Buddha, we may be thinking about fame, wealth, or relationships. What comes out of our mouths may be the name of the Buddha, but our hearts are filled with worldly desires. The 8th story, unable to practice patience, a lifetime of virtue falls short of true attainment. On a quiet autumn evening, the last rays of sunlight cast their glow on the desolate river. Elder cultivator Bat Jiak had devoted 59 years to spiritual practice. Day by day, he ferried passengers across the river, using his trade as a means to cultivate himself. He vowed to renounce all worldly fame, fortune, and romantic attachments. Over the decades, he had ferried 99,000 people across the river, earning immeasurable merit and nearing the fruition of his spiritual path. One autumn afternoon, torrential waters surged from upstream, churning the river into a frothy torrent. Amidst a heavy rainstorm and fierce winds, a woman and her young boy approached, pleading with Bat Jiak to ferry them across. Concerned about the danger, he hesitated, but the woman implored him, explaining an urgent family matter. He agreed and, mustering all his strength, navigated the boat through the treacherous currents, bringing the mother and child safely to the other side. Once they reached the shore, the woman said, "I left a package on the other side. Could you go back and retrieve it for me?" Bat Jiak silently nodded and rowed back through the turbulent waters. Upon returning with the package, the woman added, "My son also left behind his rattan ball. Could you fetch it as well?" At this point, Bat Jiak could no longer contain his frustration and shouted, "Ungrateful woman! Don't you understand anything? I wasn't born to serve you endlessly. As soon as he finished speaking, a brilliant light illuminated the scene. The mother and child vanished, replaced by Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva seated upon a lotus throne. Smiling, the Bodhisattva said, "You have yet to master the virtue of patience, so your merit remains incomplete." Bat Jiak stood frozen at the riverbank, the wet mud beneath his feet mirroring the traces of a lifetime of cultivation weathered by rain and storms. In the distance, the call of a lone cuckoo echoed forlornly through the rainy sky. Buddhism teaches about truth, compassion, and patience itself is a boundless virtue. To practice patience, one must first embody truth and compassion, for without honesty and kindness toward the world, how can one truly endure others? Like Bat Jiak, a single lapse in patience caused a lifetime of merit to fall short of true attainment. To cultivate without enlightenment, or to enlighten without practice, is akin to the cuckoo's cry, a reminder that only through sincere cultivation and patience can one achieve perfect enlightenment. Yet, for those who seek to return to the true path, it is never too late. The ninth story, the sadness of the cracked pot and the message of self-worth. Every day, a kind-hearted farmer used a yoke to carry two pots, one perfectly intact and the other cracked. While the perfect pot always brought back a full measure of water, the cracked pot could only hold half. Despite this, the farmer continued to use both pots. The cracked pot felt deeply ashamed and constantly blamed itself. It couldn't understand why the farmer kept it and even thought of itself as a useless burden. Over time, the perfect pots began to gossip, making the cracked pot feel even more miserable. It remembered the days when it was whole, but now, with its crack, it saw itself as completely worthless. After much inner turmoil, the cracked pot decided to speak with the farmer. It wanted to persuade him to discard it, ending its feelings of inadequacy. One night, the cracked pot called the farmer over and expressed its gratitude for being kept all these years, but confessed that it could no longer endure the sense of uselessness. The farmer listened patiently and smiled. He told the pot that he had never considered discarding it and had always known its value. The next morning, the farmer asked the cracked pot to pay close attention to the path. On the way to the well, the pot noticed beautiful flowers blooming along both sides of the road. When they reached the well, the farmer explained that, ever since the pot became cracked, he had occasionally sown seeds along the path. Thanks to the water that trickled out from the crack, those seeds had grown into a vibrant array of flowers, which he could gather and sell for even more profit than selling water. Hearing this, the cracked pot was moved to tears. It realized that even in its imperfection, it could contribute and be useful in its own unique way. From then on, the cracked pot no longer felt inferior, but instead resolved to give its best until it eventually returned to the earth from which it came. This story delivers a gentle yet profound reminder that everyone has their own worth. Life is constantly changing, and circumstances may sometimes make us feel weak or useless. However, what truly matters is recognizing and appreciating ourselves. Instead of focusing on flaws, we should find ways to turn them into strengths and contribute in our own special ways. Sometimes, it's our imperfections that allow us to create unique differences and meaning in life. Like the cracked pot, when you recognize your value, you'll find joy and peace. No matter how challenging life becomes, the core truth remains: you, with all you are and all you can do, have the power to live well and give back even more. The 10th story, summer insects cannot discuss ice and snow, so why argue? In the Nam Hoa Kin by Zhuangzi, there is a story about a frog and a turtle. The frog, living in a shallow well, says to the turtle, who lives in the eastern sea, "Look at me. I'm so happy. I jump up onto the edge of the well, rest on the wall, and when I dive into the water, I keep my arms close to my body. When I wade through the mud, the water barely reaches my ankles. Looking around, there's no one happier than I am. Why don't you come here and enjoy yourself, too? The turtle, hearing this, responds, My home is the sea, vast for thousands of miles and immeasurably deep. During the reign of Emperor Yu, there were floods 9 times in 10 years, but the sea didn't rise at all. During the reign of Emperor Shang, there was a 7-year drought, and the sea's shores didn't recede. That's the true joy of the Eastern Sea. The frog, upon hearing this, was taken aback, embarrassed, and felt a sense of shame. The frog, living in the shallow well, thought that its small well was the entire world, not realizing that beyond it lay the vast, boundless sea. Similarly, a summer insect, which lives only for 3 months, only knows the heat of the summer and cannot comprehend the freezing cold of winter. Humans are the same. Amidst the vastness of the universe, each person is just a grain of sand in the desert, a drop of water in the river. Human wisdom is limited, and how can we understand what lies beyond the scope of our knowledge? Some people, because they do not know, believe they know. When the truth is pointed out to them, not only do they fail to accept it, but they also vehemently oppose it. For things beyond their knowledge, no matter how eloquently one argues, they will never understand. The 11th story, Who is Right? One day, an interesting debate took place between Master Vo Duc and a 7-year-old boy. Despite his young age, the boy was very intelligent and often visited the master to discuss random topics. Master Vo Duc noticed that the boy was quick-witted and exhibited some qualities of Buddhist teachings. One day, Master Vo Duc said, I'm busy with so many tasks every day, and I don't have time to always debate with you. Today, we will have a debate. If you lose, you will buy me some cake. If I lose, I will buy you cake. Upon hearing this, the boy agreed immediately and said, Then, Master, you should give me the money first. Master Vo Duc laughed and replied, We're debating to determine the winner, and the loser will lose money, not the other way around. Master Vo Duc then began testing the boy's intellect. Let's say I'm a large rooster. The boy quickly responded, If you're a rooster, then I will be a small insect. Master Vo Duc continued, If you are an insect, then you must buy me cake, because roosters eat insects. Without hesitation, the boy replied, You have already lost. If I am an insect, I would fly away as soon as I see you. You wouldn't have the chance to eat me, and you wouldn't be able to catch me to get cake. Also, Master, we shouldn't argue or try to win against each other. Therefore, you are the one who lost. Master Vo Duc was surprised by the boy's quick thinking, but he still felt conflicted. He decided to take the boy to a crowd and ask for their judgment. He thought that if many people listened to the story and provided their opinions, a fair answer would be found. Among the crowd, he recounted the story and asked who was right. Everyone admired the boy's intelligence and calm demeanor, as well as the master's wisdom. But in the end, no one could give a clear answer. They realized that this was a matter that couldn't be easily decided, and there was no definite winner or loser. In the end, Master Vo Duc had to admit, in this debate, neither the wise nor the experienced could fully prevail. 3 days later, Master Vo Duc quietly went to buy the cake for the boy, accepting that he had lost the debate. The story of the rooster and the insect, which seemed like a playful exchange between teacher and student, contained profound Buddhist philosophy. Buddhism always uses purity as the foundation to discern truth, not distinguishing between large or small, high or low, and not focusing on right or wrong, winning or losing. In every argument, if one's heart still seeks to distinguish winners and losers, still holds onto attachments, then the mind remains unsettled. In this debate, Master Vo Duc was already thinking about winning because he was the adult, the one who understood the teachings better. From the beginning, he had expected to win. Meanwhile, the boy responded naturally and calmly. He didn't care about winning or losing and was willing to be a small, weak insect before the rooster. The insect could simply fly away when faced with the rooster, protect itself without having to fight. This is similar to the teaching that between teacher and student, and between people, sometimes there is no need to argue or try to win. When the heart is pure, free of comparison, and without attachment, that is true wisdom. A person who lives with a pure mind, unaffected by desires and attachments, will attain true wisdom and inner peace. Master Vo Duc realized that the more one desires to win, the heavier the mind becomes. The boy, through letting go, had a free and open mind, reaching a state of carefree wisdom, without self-centeredness. In conclusion, people saw Master Vo Duc silently go to buy the cake for the boy, not because he had lost, but because he had realized that true wisdom lies in letting go and maintaining a pure heart. Attachment and the desire to win only disturb the mind. From then on, Master Vo Duc taught his disciples and those around him that in life, those who achieve inner peace, who do not fight or try to prove themselves, are the ones with true wisdom. The 12th story, The Old Master and the Three Small Cakes. Once upon a time, there was an old master of rituals who traveled with his young disciple. Together, they performed ceremonies, offering prayers and blessings for families in their village. One day, they were invited to conduct a ceremony for a wealthy family. It was a grand occasion, and the altar was filled with various offerings, including fruits and colorful cakes. During the ceremony, the old master noticed 3 small cakes, carefully wrapped and placed on the altar. Seeing no one paying attention, the old master quickly took the cakes and hid them. He then handed them to his young disciple and whispered, "Take these and eat them, lest you get hungry." After the ceremony was over, the two of them packed up and set off to return home. On the way, the old master grew tired and hungry. After walking a short distance, he turned to his disciple and said, "Bring out the 3 cakes I gave you earlier, and let's eat them to ease our hunger." The young disciple paused, looking somewhat embarrassed, and replied hesitantly, "Master, I thought you gave those cakes to me, so I ate them all already." Upon hearing this, the old master fell silent. His face darkened, and his eyebrows furrowed in displeasure. He said nothing but continued walking, occasionally sighing. The two walked in silence on the foggy village road, the master ahead and the disciple trailing behind. The air grew tense and heavy. After walking a little farther, the old master suddenly turned around and, with a scowl, scolded, "Am I your prisoner that you have to follow me around like this, as if you're escorting me?" Startled by the scolding, the young disciple hurried to catch up and walked faster, trying to pass his master while lowering his head, careful not to offend. But to his surprise, the old master snapped again, "Do you think you're my teacher now, walking in front of me? Don't you know the proper way?" Now thoroughly confused and unsure, the disciple slowed down and tried walking side by side with his master, carefully matching his steps to avoid further upset. But again, the old master glared and yelled, "What do you think you are, my equal? Walking beside me? That's rude." The young disciple, utterly perplexed and anxious, didn't know how to behave. He stopped, took a few steps back, and positioned himself on the side of the road. With a choked voice, he said, "Master, I don't know how to walk properly anymore. If I walk ahead, you scold me. If I walk beside you, you yell at me. And if I walk behind, I am also criticized. Please, Master, tell me how I should walk to avoid offending you." The old master paused, turned back, and looked at his disciple. His face was full of frustration and sternness. His voice was low but still filled with irritation as he replied, "You can walk however you want, but first, return those 3 cakes to me." What seemed to be a humorous situation actually carries a profound lesson about generosity and attitude towards others. The old master, a learned man who was respected for his understanding of rights and manners, lost his temper over the small issue of the missing cakes. His anger obscured the very patience and kindness he would have otherwise taught his disciple. The old master's inability to let go of his anger over the 3 cakes led him to continuously criticize his disciple for trivial matters, such as the position of walking ahead, beside, or behind. His mind, consumed by regret and irritation, prevented him from maintaining the calm composure expected of a teacher. His behavior became petty and hostile. From this story, we learn that when we cling to small grievances and fail to let go of insignificant annoyances, we create a cycle of negativity that clouds our judgment and makes it hard to be forgiving toward others. True generosity and tolerance are not only reflected in our words, but also in our actions, especially when faced with unexpected circumstances. When we hold on to trivial matters, they taint our hearts and prevent us from being truly generous, making us small-minded and petty. In life, if we do not learn to let go of the small things, we risk letting them dominate our minds and lives, preventing us from finding peace or showing understanding toward others. The old master's lesson to his disciple is one of self-awareness. By letting go of attachment to even the smallest things, we free ourselves from the grip of anger and can live more harmoniously. The 13th story, Faith in Justice and Karma. Jia Kui was born into a poor farming family. From a young age, his parents taught him, justice is not always visible, but it always exists. With this belief, he grew up to carry on the family's farming tradition and lived a virtuous life. He never harbored envy or harmed others for personal gain, even when faced with countless hardships. The greatest challenge in Jia Kui's life came after a harvest season. A massive storm struck, devastating his entire field. Trees were uprooted, and his crops were submerged in muddy water, leaving all his efforts in ruins. Standing amidst the destruction, Jia Kui couldn't help but feel disheartened and question, does justice truly exist? Yet instead of complaining, he chose to persevere, quietly repairing his fields and starting over. One day, while Jia Kui was working under the scorching sun, a procession of officials passed through the village. The head official, known for his integrity and kindness, had heard about Jia Kui's circumstances. Touched by the farmer's resilience and virtuous nature, the official decided to help. He granted Jia Kui a fertile piece of land and a sum of money to rebuild his life. With this support, along with his diligence and skill, Jia Kui soon enjoyed a bountiful harvest. His family's life gradually improved, becoming more prosperous. The villagers, inspired by Jia Kui's story, came to understand that justice may not always appear immediately, but it is always present. They believed Jia Kui was a living testament to the law of karma, heaven sees all. Jia Kui's story is more than the journey of a farmer, it is a profound lesson about life. It reminds us that justice may arrive late, but it never fails to appear. Those who live virtuously and persist in doing what is right will always receive their deserved reward, no matter the obstacles they face. Justice, though quiet, operates in miraculous ways in this world. The 14th story, A Pure Heart, Heaven and Earth's Shield. Have you ever wondered if living a life with a pure and kind heart truly brings the protection of heaven and earth? In today's fast-paced and tempting world, honesty and compassion often feel rare. Min Fong grew up in a poor family in a small village nestled at the foot of a mountain. From a young age, he was known for his honesty, kindness, and willingness to help others. One day, while working in the fields, Min Fong came across a stranger lying on the roadside, pale and exhausted. Without hesitation, he brought the man home and cared for him with everything he had. Min Fong cooked porridge and helped the man regain his strength. The stranger, a merchant who had fallen ill while passing through the village, was deeply grateful. Before leaving, he promised to return and repay the kindness, but Min Fong simply smiled and said, "I help not for the sake of being repaid." Time passed, and a massive storm suddenly hit, causing severe destruction throughout the village. Floods swept away possessions, ruined crops, and left a scene of devastation. Yet, miraculously, Min Fong's small home and garden remained untouched. When asked by the villagers, he humbly replied, "Perhaps because I have little to lose, heaven and earth spared me." The villagers began to whisper that heaven and earth truly protected Min Fong because of his pure heart. But the surprises didn't end there. The merchant from long ago, upon hearing of the disaster, returned to the village with a cart full of supplies for Min Fong. Min Fong accepted the goods but distributed them among the villagers instead. This act left the villagers even more awestruck, convinced that Min Fong was shielded by heaven and earth for his goodness. Min Fong's story is not just about an ordinary man but a testament to the power of kindness and purity. Even in the darkest times, Min Fong's pure heart became an invisible shield, protecting him from life's harshest challenges. The villagers, inspired by his example, began to change their ways. They spread the values Min Fong embodied, and over time, the village became more harmonious and warm-hearted. Min Fong's life showed them that by living with a clear conscience and kindness toward others, they too could find peace and protection. Often, the good deeds we do may not yield immediate benefits, but they have the power to transform our lives and those around us. So, always keep your heart pure, for it is a magical strength that helps us overcome life's adversities. The 15th story, Always Cheerful, a Form of Strength. True joy does not come from external material possessions, but from a higher spiritual state, where one harmonizes with nature and lives freely, unbound by desires. On an autumn afternoon, renowned philosopher Nguyen Tri Vinh, who lived during Vietnam's feudal era, wrote, "Only the breeze from the great river and the pure moonlight over the mountains are infinite treasures that belong to all. They are the shared joys no one can take away." Nguyen Tri Vinh endured many significant hardships in life, but he did not succumb to sorrow or despair. Instead, he let go of desires and attachments, returning to nature. In a simple bamboo house amidst green hills, Vinh found joy in scarcity. He wrote books, watched the sunrise, and listened to the wind rustling through the bamboo. This simplicity brought him a sense of liberation and peace. However, not everyone can achieve such cheerfulness. Life is a series of challenges and failures. Maintaining optimism and confidence during difficult times is, in itself, a form of resilience. Vinh once shared, "When we learn to let go of things we cannot change, life becomes lighter." Another inspiring story is that of Tran Minh Dung, a philosopher and military strategist from the Lai, Tran dynasties. Dung, known for his brilliance in strategy, was exiled to a swampy, toxic region after being falsely accused of rebellion. During his exile, he witnessed many of his companions succumb to illness, but he himself remained healthy. When asked why, Dung simply smiled and replied, "I choose not to let my heart be burdened." Dung believed that optimism is not an innate gift, but the result of mental cultivation. Instead of dwelling on sorrow, he used his time in exile to reflect and write his philosophy of life. From his painful experiences, he developed a new perspective on joy from within. Both Nguyen Tri Vinh and Tran Minh Dung agreed that living in the present is the key to lasting happiness. They refused to let the past haunt them or the future overwhelm them. Dung once said, "If you constantly dwell on what is past or worry about what is yet to come, you are only robbing yourself of the peace in the present." At one of the darkest points in his life, Dung built a wooden coffin and locked himself inside to contemplate death. He explained, "When you accept death, all fears vanish, and only then do you truly begin to live. From this profound act, Dumb reached a state of deep tranquility and developed his philosophy of living joyfully in the present moment. This story reminds us that true happiness is not found in material things, but within a peaceful mind. To achieve such joy, we must learn to let go of ego, live in the moment, and face challenges with optimism. Remember, only by transcending our own limitations can we truly find joy and freedom in life. Thank you for taking the time to engage with this story. If you found it meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to explore more valuable lessons with us. See you in the next video, and may you always stay strong and achieve the goals you aspire to. Goodbye and take care.